The 1968 student movement in Mexico wasn't an isolated event but one of the most complex processes of the 20th century. It happened during the Cold War when the political environment was more tense than before. Although it started as a school fight, it became a deeper protest because young people directly questioned the system. Under Gustavo Díaz Ordaz, Mexico had a more stable economy than its neighbors. This was the government's main advantage to show a modern image. However, the biggest disadvantage was that the political system was the most closed and less tolerant of all. The situation got worse because the police were more violent than necessary. According to Relatos Historias en México, ND, it was the most authoritarian moment on record. The movement grew faster than the government could talk, uniting the UNAM and IPN, which used to be more like rivals than friends. For the government, the Olympic Games were more important than the social demands. According to the AONIA ND, authorities saw the protest as a threat, an idea that was more wrong than right. It all ended in Tlatelolco, the most painful and the most shameful event in our history. In conclusion, the 1968 was a clash between a society that wanted to be more democratic and a government that was more threatening than ever. Its legacy has been more powerful than fear, and it's a lesson that is more necessary today than ever.
In 1968, Mexican politics was still centered under the government of President Gustavo Díaz Ordaz and the almost absolute dominion of the PRI. The administration was one of the strict and most repressive of the 20th century in the country. The political system was less pluralistic than the other democracies, and it functioned in a more authoritarian manner because the opposition had very few real possibilities on the participation in the power. According to the National Electoral Institution, the student movement of the 1968 evidenced the need of a democracy broad and more transparent. In 2018, in that context, the government prioritized the century international image with control was media because of Mexico would host the Olympic Games that year. According to the National Institution of Students of the Mexican Revolution, the authorities responded to the protest with more strict and more repressive than other times because they considered the movement affect public order. INEHRND. This demonstrates that the public of the time were more closet to participatory and to dialogue with society was limited. The National Human Rights Commission was indicated that it fact represent a serious violence of human rights and one of the most tragic and shocking episodes of the 20th century in Mexico. CNDH-ND. The conclusion, the politics of 1968 was one of the most authoritarian periods in Mexican history.
According to M+ 2018 and Medioteca 2015, the student movement of 1988 in Mexico started because young people want to make the country more democratic and end the authoritarian government of the PRI. At that time, the government was preparing the Olympic Games in Mexico City, and students were protesting in the streets. The conflict starts after problems between students and the police. While the students were organizing the National Strike Council, CNH, the government was using more force, and the situation was becoming more tense and more serious. The students wrote a list of demands. They asked for freedom for political prisoners, the elimination of the green cards, social dissolution because the government was using it to punish protests. The end of the road police, the removal of some police leaders, mourning and help for the families of the victims, punishment for the people responsible, and a public dialogue with the government. The movement was important, and other student movements in 1968 in places like Paris and Prague. In Mexico, the repression was stronger than in some other countries because the government wanted to look stable before the Olympic Games.
During the 1968 student movement, the media played a powerful role in shaping what most of the country believed that was happening. According to Elliot, 2023, many journalists were pressured to follow the government's official narrative, while critical voices were limited or completely censored. The pressure meant that the information broadcasted on television and published in newspapers was more controlled and more restricted than the reality experienced in the streets. Compared to testimonies, the media version was far less honest and far less tragic. As Petrick, 2018 explains, after the Tlatelolco massacre on October 2nd, the dominant press avoided presenting the event as a massacre. Instead, they described it as a confrontation or agitation, which made the violence seem less brutal and less shocking than it truly was. Newspapers repeated official death statistics that weren't even as close as the estimates of the witnesses, and they emphasized government calls for order rather than accountability by constantly repeating official statements and preferring to focus on the Olympics. Television constructed a version of reality that was more convenient for authorities than for the victims. This selective reporting reduced public outrage and protected the government's national and international image. The official narrative became stronger than independent voices and, over time, shaped collective memory. This way, media control wasn't just a form of censorship, but one of the most effective strategies of repression during and after 1968.
A very important and sad process. We made this project to remember the students and their fight for freedom. In the history, we can see a big contrast. The students wanted a better country, but the leaders were very hard and bad. At the same time, the Olympic Games were more important for the government than the people. The police and the army used many guns and was very violent. They wanted to show a perfect Mexico to the world, but that was a lie. The news wasn't honest because the TV and the paper only talked about the sports. They didn't show the truth about the streets. This was a form of silence on control. They chose the history to show a feelings of Raúl, Nacha, Tita, and Adela. They were real people with dreams. In our short film, we show their secret meetings and the same night in Tlatelolco. We made this because their voice is still alive in us. And finally, the day October 2nd is very painful. The students were brave. Today we need to remember the history to protect our future. Thank you very much.